here, but we are still getting after it, making more progress on the 59 rat rod here. Last video, we got both front doors all mounted up. We had to chop apart the rocker, we had to chop apart the A-pillars, but we were able to eventually fit both doors and make up these super beefy door hinge mounts. We still have to box in that whole A-pillar on both sides, but before we get into that, I want to figure out the mounts for the fenders. After that, we ended up chopping up the front radiator support, so that way we can make enough room for the hood and the fenders. We ended up having to chop off like 9 or 10 inches total because the 59 nose is a lot stubbier than the Thunderbird nose was. So today's video, we're going to pick up where we left off and see if we can get this whole front clip mounted up and solid. So I trimmed off this whole front radiator support. It was a rough cut, so we're gonna have to go back through here and trim up some more of this frame rail, so that way this flange of the fender can come in, and then that middle grill valance or the rest of the grill can actually sit far enough back and in between each of these fenders. Then I think what we're gonna end up doing is making some kind of plate, cap off the end of the frame rail there, and then put a little tab that sticks out, so that way we can sandwich the mounting tab with the fender and the other side of that middle grill valance piece. So those two will sandwich and bolt together while simultaneously mounting both body panels. So we're going to take these fenders off and trim these frame rails a little bit back. I apologize in advance for the noise in the background. We got the heater going because right now it says it's 9 degrees and it feels like -7. This morning it was 0 and it felt like -19. So in order to get some progress done, we have to have that heater going. So sorry about that in advance. The next thing we're going to be working on is I want to get these fenders mounted up, and I want to utilize these flanges right here because we don't have to reinvent the wheel to use it. The only problem we're going to run into with doing that is once the fender's on there, it's going to be really tough to get to the upper bolts for the doors, especially when this is all boxed in and restructured. And I might be able to reach my hand up in there to get to those fender bolts, but in order to get to the doors, it'll be really, really hard. So without having to take the fender off or the door off, and I want to be able to take the door off without taking the fender off, or vice versa. So what we're going to end up having to do, I'm going to put the rest of these bolts in here. I only have a couple in there just for mock-up. I'm going to put the rest of the bolts in there, and then I'm going to tack all these nuts. That way you can just access the bolts from the other side, and you don't have to worry about getting a wrench on the back of these nuts here. So let's do that right now. Again, I'm going to keep it simple. I think I'm just going to end up bending up a piece of angle that comes out this way and then shoots forward and has a bolt on the back side that's welded through, basically creating a little stud that these notches will go around like so, and it'll have a nut on the back side, and we'll be able to access it through this door opening. Once we get that back part of the fender mounted up, then we can figure out where we can put mounts for the top flanges, and then we can get a better idea where the fender is going to sit. So we're going to start by making up those angles to mount up the rear part of the fender, and then we'll get that rest of that figured out. This is about a foot of 16 gauge. I don't even know if this brake will bend it. I think the capacity for the whole thing is 22 gauge, but we're gonna find out. All right, so it started to kind of fall apart. I don't know if I can, I think these are the adjustments for the material gauge thickness, but I don't know, this one's sort of backing out. give her a little beans. Oh my god. I think it did it. Oh, dude. It even went over 90. Actually, I was wrong. Just about dead nuts on 90. That was guesswork. Alright, after a brief intermission, we are back. The other day, it was so cold that my welder, one of the two, just was not producing power like it should have. The Eastwood kept throwing error codes, like there was an electrical issue, and I noticed when I was trying to weld with 80 amps, it was only giving me about 16 to 18 amps, and it just wouldn't strike an arc. And the generator welder was running, so I don't know if it was a power output issue from the generator or if it was just way too cold for the Eastwood, but either way, others weren't working. And I took the panels off and just made sure there was no condensation buildup or anything like dust like that. It's a brand new machine, so it shouldn't have any issues like that, but I don't know. But we got some bolts to have some makeshift studs on our angle piece so our fenders have something to mount to. I just found some old header bolts that I had kicking around, so I cleaned those up and tacked those on. We'll take this and we'll tack it on the inside like so, and the slots of the fender will slide over those studs and we'll bolt that in, so then we'll have a mounting solution for the back part of the fender. So we'll get those tacked in and then we'll end up figuring out what to do with mounting the top of the fender and the very front of the fender, so we can get that front apron mounted up and the two fenders tied together and mounted. So these are killing two birds with one stone, starting the box-in process of this A-pillar while also adding strength to the door hinge mounts and then adding a mounting solution for the rear part of the fender. Now that the rear part of the fender is located, now we can start trying to figure out what we're going to do to secure a couple spots on the top of the fender here and then secure this front flange there. There's not a ton of this top flange left. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to try to rebuild some of that. I don't think I'm going to, because it's just a rat rod and there's still some good mounting solutions up top right there. On both sides of the car, where the strut tower kind of fades into the A-pillar and the cowl, I had to cut the pinch weld. So what we're going to have to do is weld this seam right here, kind of regain strength and tie that back together. But we had to cut the pinch weld flange off so that way the fender would come up over and fit properly. Now that I know that the passenger side is going to work the way I wanted it to, now we can cut out, bend up, and tack together the driver's side, and then keep figuring out the rest of the mounting solution. All right, we have rear fender mounts. We got both of the A-pillar mounting solutions all fabbed up and tacked in there, kind of crudely, but it works. We got 3 bolts for each side of the fenders. I ended up pushing the Harbor Freight sheet metal bender a little too hard and ended up breaking it. So we're gonna have to fix that. A little stud that holds the pivot for this top arm, it broke. So no big deal, we'll just have to drill it out and re-plug weld it. So we'll get that fixed. I got the front valance and the hood mocked up because I want to make sure the fenders aren't sitting too far out or in
before we start deciding and figuring out where the mounts for the front of the fenders are going to be, and also the mounts for the front apron. And I just plopped the hood on there to make sure that the apron was kind of rough, really where it's got to be. But the problem with the hood mock-up is the hinges that are permanently mounted to the hood side getting in the way of this cowl right here. So it's not letting it sit down far enough or back. So we're gonna have to end up cutting a hole in here so these little hinges can pocket in there, because I actually want to reuse these somehow, not try to reinvent the wheel. Project rolling, we're gonna have to just cut a hole in here. That way the hood can sit remotely close to where it's gotta be. And then we can get a better idea where the front apron's gotta be, where the front fenders have to sit. And then we can start figuring out mounts to tie into the front frame rails. We got the cowl all notched, and so that the hood hinges fit in and the hood actually fits and sits down where it's supposed to be. We were able to pull some measurements, and thankfully the flanges where the fenders and the aprons mount up, they line up within a 1/4 inch or so of the outside face of these frame rails. So basically we're going to keep it simple, cap the ends of the frame rails, and then just build some quick simple tabs that'll come out and catch and bolt through the flanges of the fenders, and we're going to see how solid that is. If that's solid enough, I'm not going to do anything to try to make this rusted area solid. I'm probably just going to keep that, trim off all the crap that's there. Then we'll tighten up the rear mounts, and we'll see how tight everything feels, and if it's within reason for a rat rod, we're going to just run it. Problem with using magnets, if you drop them, they become furry. All right, the whole front clip is officially mounted, or at least temporarily mounted. I only have a couple bolts holding everything in, and the front mounts that I made are only just tacked in for now. Capped off the end of the frame rail, just made some basic T-brackets. The flange that catches 2 bolts, well, at least catches 2 bolts on the other fender. This is a little rotted, so I might have to just send another hole through here or something like that. Everything's actually pretty solid, even just with a couple tacks. Loose bolts, front and rear, and only 1 bolt right now holding each fender on and this whole apron setup. Once I do final assembly and get everything officially installed, these will have a couple bolts in here to tie the apron to the fender, so that'll be even more tied in. We'll have this upper part of the apron tied into the fender here on both sides. The issue I'm running into is figuring out a way to get this hood all mounted up and keep the functionality of it opening and closing. I thought about doing like 4 hood pins, you know, like 1 in each corner, front and back, and then having just quick release pins and having the whole hood just come up and off. But I really don't like the idea of having to take the hood off every single time I want to open it. So I want some functionality with it. I started around with trying to make the 59 hinges work, or even some Fox Body Mustang hinges work. But the problem with the 59 hinges is these actually hinge backwards into the cowl on the 59. I don't really want to cut that far into the cowl. I think I can come up with a more simple solution. I did try to make the factory Thunderbird's hood hinges work. And I was really close to making this whole system work. The only problem is when you have this fully collapsed, it sits about 1 inch or so too high, and that's without modifying the brackets and all that. But once you start going into modifying the geometry of these, they don't end up working right, and it's just a lot more work than I really care to do for just hood hinges. Which is funny that I say that now because my solution to this is I think I want to do something a little different and actually have the hood tilt forward. It makes it a little more difficult with the Mercedes hood because the grille is actually tied into the hood rather than the grille being separate. So it'll be a little more difficult to get that to actually pivot on the bottom section of the grille right there. What I'm thinking about doing is basically framing out the inside of the grille and tying it a little better to the braces so that we're not actually relying on the structural integrity of this grille to hold the weight of the hood. I think I can frame that out with some really small square tubing or a round bar or something, and then that'll create a solid point. Since I cut out the old radiator support, I have to frame this out somehow and tie those back together anyway. I can frame it in a way that I can then tie off some brackets to create a mounting solution for that pivot on the front. So I figure I might as well kill two birds with one stone and tie the frames back together, add a spot for a radiator to mount, or at least make some tabs off of it so a radiator can mount in there, and give the basis for these tilt head hinges. So now that I've been thinking about it, I'm kind of determined to make that work. I think it would be really cool, kind of something different. You wouldn't expect it. I would also like to make it kind of like a quick pin setup. So it'd be nice to be able to tilt that forward, have it out of the way, but also at the same time, just take it completely off. So that's what I'm thinking. It's not the most simple solution to this problem, but I think it'll be cool. I have some creative ideas, and we're gonna kind of just use junk that we got laying around to make it happen. I think what we're gonna start with is getting that radiator core support fabbed up, just so we can get that front structure kind of as one piece again. We got our radiator core support all fabbed up and tacked up, and we test fit it, and looks like it's gonna fit. So we're gonna take this whole front clip right off, get this piece tacked up, make some gussets, tie it back into the frame, and then we're gonna finish weld everything up in the front. Try to get a little creative on the gussets for that front structure. Broke out the Eastwood dimple die set that I bought and haven't used yet. So, little 1/2-inch dimple die. It came out okay. Not bad for the first time ever using these things though. We got the whole radiator core support all fabbed up and fully welded in. The frame rails are all nice and tied in. The last thing we have to do is get this hood mounted. Like I said before, these hoods normally tilt back and the grill gets in the way, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to work on them because they don't fully hinge back out of the way completely. So you're stuck with fighting around the grill, and it's the amount of times that you'll hit your head working on these things. I want to eliminate that, and plus I want to put a unique twist on the whole front end of this car. So I've decided to do a tilt forward, and the way I think I'm going to do that is now I get to actually start adding like rat rod-esque type parts to this car. Besides the fact that it's rusted out and ratty looking anyway, I want to start adding cool little details that you see on rat rods. So what I think I'm going to do for this hood tilt is we need a bar up front, so that way the front of the hood has something to mount to and hinge off of. So I came up with this idea of doing kind of like a makeshift bumper slash crossbar made out of some old camshafts and old rods. We're going to tie those to the uprights on this radiator core support. We're going to have them come through these old bumper ports. And then the ends of the camshaft where the timing gear set bolts to actually fits right inside the pin for the pistons on the connecting rod. So the width of the two camshafts together isn't exactly what we need. So we're going to chop that down to the width, get those rods welded to the frame, and then figure out a way to tie the bottom of the grill into the bar and make a hinge system.
Sick. Well, it's official. Almost every single piece of the 59 Mercedes is
Mounted to the Thunderbird chassis, including the hood. The fenders have mounts, the front apron has mounts, the doors are functional. Everything that we are putting on this car that resembles Mercedes, minus the rockers, I still have to put those on, but that's just minuscule stuff, is officially mounted. This is a major milestone for this build, and it's super cool to have all the panels on there and everything that's supposed to function is functioning, including our awesome forward tilt hood. Now, I could be wrong, but I would argue that this is probably one of the first forward tilt hoods on one of these Ponton Mercedes builds. I've never seen anything like it. It's really cool to see an idea that I had in my head come to fruition and actually work out. So let me give you guys a rundown on how we mounted this. Like I said before, keeping with the theme of rat rod, I used an old set of rods from the 351 build. Those are the stock rods from that we pulled out before we rebuilt it. And then we used a camshaft from that same motor, and then a camshaft from my buddy's motor, who we built a 408 for his car together. So that other camshaft is from his. Then we have two rods that I cut up that I pulled out of 408 that we built for the Mustang after we blew it up. We ended up having oil starvation on one of the bearings. The rod locked up and basically junked the rotating assembly and the block. So the Mustang motor is junk. If you haven't seen that video, go check that out. But we decided to use the old parts from that and tightened up the diameter of the rod so that way it fits snug to the journal bearings of the camshaft. So it's got a nice smooth mechanism. So the hood pivots on these rods right here. The camshafts themselves don't move. Then we ended up reinforcing the grille itself because the grille is only screwed to the hood, and I didn't want to rely on just the grille to be a main mounting point and pivot point because there's a lot of leverage with this sheet metal here. Even though it doesn't weigh a lot, it's still a lot of leverage for stress cracks and other breaks in this old sheet metal. So I took some 1/2-inch round bar, bent it up to fit the contour of the perimeter of the inside of the grille, so that way that was framed out. It's tied into the sheet metal here, it's tied into the sheet metal of the hood up here, and then it's also tied down here. So this is all one piece now, and it's not just leveraging on the grille itself. After that, we ended up making some tabs to connect the actual frame structure of the grille to the rods. Just made some quick tabs on the outsides of the rod bearing. I still have to make inner tabs on either side and then finish weld everything to actually finalize it, but right now it's just tacked together and it works. So yeah, a very basic setup. Again, I wanted to keep the theme of a rat rod and used old engine parts from the Mustang and previous builds, which I thought was pretty cool. And we were able to make something completely unique that you wouldn't expect for one of these cars. So I'm super stoked on how it turned out. It looks so good. The whole car looks so good just sitting on that Thunderbird chassis. Again, it's really cool to see this whole thing come together, and now all the panels are actually mounted. Now, while I still have a bunch of finish welding to do, a little bit of bracket tie-ins for the front fenders. The rear mounts are still tacked in, so I still have to box this whole B-pillar in. Right now, the fenders are bolted on there, and so is the apron, but everything is just loosely on there. And we still have to finish weld the bracketry and the whole mechanism for the hood. So we still have a lot of work in that terms, but I didn't think anybody wanted to watch an hour-long time-lapse of me just welding things. That's why we're going to end this video here. Oh, I did get all the parts for the air ride, so we're going to be doing a full air ride system on this car. I think in the next video, that's what we're going to start tackling next. We're going to be doing a full custom air ride kit from Air Slam It, so stay tuned for that. If you made it this far in this video, I appreciate you guys sticking around and watching, and we'll see you on the next one.